Roman cheesemaking fed an empire and built a culinary legacy. By the end of this story, you will know exactly how a simple farm staple became a tool of conquest. We will uncover the secret ingredient that magically turned milk solid and reveal why a soldier's cheese ration could last for months. What forgotten flavor do you think was most prized on an emperor's table? A gentle breeze rustles through the olive groves surrounding a Roman villa rustica. This is not a grand city palace, but the bustling heart of a working farm, a self-sufficient world where the day's rhythm is set by the sun and the needs of the animals. On hillsides dotted with thyme and rosemary, herds of sheep and goats graze, their bells creating a soft metallic music across the landscape. While cows would later become more prominent, these smaller, hardier animals were the true backbone of early Roman dairying, perfectly suited to the terrain. Central to this entire operation was the herdsman. His life was one of constant motion, from the first light of dawn to the last glow of evening, guiding his flock to the best pastures and ensuring their safety and health. His knowledge, passed down through generations, was the first and most crucial ingredient in the cheese that would eventually feed legions. He understood which plants gave the milk a sweeter taste and how the changing seasons affected its richness. Without his skilled, watchful eye, the entire miraculous process of turning liquid milk into solid, lasting food would never even begin. The milk, still warm and frothy from the morning's milking, was carried carefully into the dairy. Here, the herdsman's precious cargo met the first of many ingenious tools designed for a single purpose. A simple wooden pail, often lined with pitch to seal its pores, awaited the fresh milk. This was not just any bucket. Its design was a quiet marvel, shaped to be stable and easy to carry, ensuring none of the precious liquid was lost on its journey from the flock to the cool, stone-lined room where the real magic would begin. Next came the straining vessels. These were often woven baskets or coarse cloth sieves, the first line of defense against any stray bits of grass or hair. Imagine a fine mesh, not of metal, but of reeds or linen, catching the larger impurities while letting the pure, white milk flow through into a waiting ceramic pot below. This initial filtration was a critical step, a purification that set the stage for transformation. The most vital tool, however, was the vessel that would witness the milk's fundamental change. A large earthenware pot, or sometimes a wooden vat, held the milk as it was gently warmed. Into this pot, the cheesemaker would introduce the secret agent, rennet. This curdling substance, typically from the stomach of a suckling kid or lamb, was the key that performed the ancient alchemy, turning liquid into soft, gelatinous curds. Once the milk had set, the cheesemaker used a clever tool called a harundo, a notched red or a wooden knife, to carefully cut the curd. These precise cuts, like a grid drawn through the gelid milk, created countless small channels, allowing the watery whey to separate and drain away from the solid protein. The curds were then gathered and placed into their final forms. The molds themselves were works of simple, functional art, often made of ceramic or carved wood. These perforated containers came in various shapes, from the classic disc we associate with cheese today to more conical forms. The holes punched or carved into the sides of these molds were not an afterthought. They were essential, providing an escape route for the last of the whey, concentrating the curds and beginning the process of creating a firm, dry cheese. Finally, to achieve the right texture and density, the filled molds were placed under pressure. A stone or a simple wooden lever press would be set atop the mold, squeezing out residual moisture and compacting the curds into a solid, cohesive wheel. This pressing was the final act of creation, turning a fragile mass into a durable, long-lasting foodstuff. Each of these tools, from the humble pail to the weighted press, was a link in a chain of culinary engineering, a testament to a practical genius that turned a perishable gift into a staple that could outlast seasons and fuel an empire. The milking began at first light, when the morning air was still cool and the animals were calm. A herdsman would settle beside a ewe or a goat, his hands moving with a practiced rhythm. Cleanliness was a silent partner in this ancient dance. The herdsman knew that any dirt or impurity could sour the entire batch, so he worked with care, often wiping the udder with a clean, damp cloth before he began. The milk flowed directly into a pristine wooden pail, its surface sealed with pitch to keep the flavor pure. This was not a hasty process. Each animal was milked thoroughly but gently, ensuring their comfort and the quality of their yield. Speed was secondary to precision. for the milk was at its most vulnerable the moment it left the animal. As soon as the pail was full, the clock started ticking. The warm, fresh milk was a perfect breeding ground for spoilage, so it was rushed from the pastoral hillside to the farm's dedicated dairy room. This space was strategically designed for coolness, often built with thick stone walls or partially sunken into the earth to maintain a lower temperature. There, the milk was immediately poured through a woven red strainer into a clean ceramic jar. This swift filtration removed any stray bits of straw, hair, or dust that had fallen in during milking. It was a simple act, but a vital one, a first line of defense in a world without refrigeration. The Romans may not have known about microbes, but their empirical wisdom taught them that haste and hygiene were the only ways to preserve milk's fleeting potential. This carefully collected liquid, still carrying the morning's warmth, was now ready for its transformation, poised to meet the mysterious ingredient that would change everything. The most crucial moment in the dairy arrived with a small, unassuming pouch. Inside was the secret heart of the entire operation, a dried piece of stomach lining from a young, milk-fed animal. This was rennet, the ancient world's most powerful culinary magic. Its discovery was likely a happy accident, perhaps when someone stored fresh milk in a pouch made from a young animal's stomach and returned to find it had miraculously solidified into a soft, jiggly mass. The Romans called this substance coagulum, and they understood its power completely. They knew that inside a suckling kid, lamb, or calf, this very lining produced a special substance, an enzyme we now call chymosin, which perfectly breaks down milk. To prepare it for cheese making, they would cut a small piece of the dried stomach and soak it in warm water or a bit of fresh milk. This reawakened the dormant enzymes, creating a potent liquid starter. When this murky solution was stirred into the warm, filtered milk back in the ceramic vat, the transformation began almost immediately. It was not a violent change, but a gentle, steady separation. The liquid milk, once smooth and uniform, would begin to pull apart, forming soft, white clouds of curd floating in a thin, yellowish liquid called whey. It must have seemed like pure alchemy, a visible division of the milk's very soul into its solid and liquid essences. The cheesemaker watched this process with a knowing eye, waiting for the perfect moment when the curds had firmed up just enough to hold their shape. This was the pivotal point of no return, where a bucket of perishable milk was reborn as the foundation for a food that could last for years. With the rennet stirred in, the waiting began. The cheesemaker would cover the ceramic vat with a cloth, creating a quiet, protected environment for the magic to unfold. Nothing happened at first. The milk appeared as calm and still as a pond, but beneath that placid surface, an invisible army of enzymes was hard at work, systematically breaking down the structure of the milk. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the liquid began to lose its fluidity. It thickened, becoming first like heavy cream, then like a thin custard. The cheesemaker tested the progress not with a clock, but with a finger or the back of a clean knife, gently pressing the surface to feel for the right resistance. This was the moment of coagulation, the point where milk shed its liquid identity and became something entirely new. The transformation culminated in a soft, quivering mass that held its shape, a gelatinous curd that perfectly captured the moment of change. If you have ever watched Jell-O set in the refrigerator, you have seen a similar, though much simpler, version of this process. The milk, like the sugary liquid, transitions from a free-flowing state to a unified, wobbly solid. But for the Roman cheesemaker, this was no simple dessert. It was the successful capture of milk's essence, the creation of a blank culinary canvas from which 100 different cheeses could be born. The entire batch now rested on this delicate, jiggling foundation, ready for the next critical step that would determine its final texture and fate. This delicate, gelid mass could not stay as it was. The cheesemaker reached for a simple but ingenious tool, a notched red or wooden blade known as a haranto. With a practiced hand, they would draw this implement through the set curds, first in one direction and then in another, creating a clean, precise grid within the vat. This was not a rough chopping motion, but a measured act of division. Every slice of that blade created new surfaces, opening up countless tiny channels within the solidifying milk. The purpose was to release the prisoner, the watery whey that was still trapped within the protein network of the curds. As the grid was cut, you could see the change immediately. The clear yellowish whey began to weep from the cut surfaces, pooling around the now distinct cubes of white curd. The size of these cubes was everything. It was the single most important decision a cheesemaker made in determining the final character of the cheese. For a hard, long-lasting cheese that could be stored for years, the cheesemaker would cut the curds into tiny, rice-sized grains. This created a massive amount of surface area, allowing nearly all of the moisture to drain away, resulting in a dense, dry product. But for a softer, fresher cheese meant for quicker consumption, the cuts were much larger, perhaps the size of walnuts. These bigger pieces retained more of their internal whey, resulting in a moister, more supple final product. The labor was physical and demanded absolute focus. Standing over the vat, the cheesemaker's arms would work steadily, ensuring the cuts were even throughout the entire batch. An uneven cut meant some curds would be too wet and others too dry, ruining the consistency of the entire wheel. This was where art met science, a moment of physical precision that echoed for months, even years into the future, locked within the texture of the cheese itself. The curds, now cut into countless tiny islands, were not yet ready to rest. They floated in their warm, watery sea of whey, still too soft and moist for the journey ahead. The cheesemaker would then carefully move the entire pot to a gentle heat source, perhaps resting it on warm stones near a fire or over a bed of embers. This was not about boiling or cooking in the way we might think. The goal was a slow, steady warming, a patient encouragement. As the temperature rose, the cheesemaker began to stir. With a clean hand or a smooth wooden paddle, they moved through the mixture, keeping the delicate curds in constant, gentle motion. This heating and stirring was a dance of controlled force. The warmth caused the proteins in the curds to contract, squeezing themselves tighter, and the constant stirring prevented the curds from clumping together into a solid, rubbery mass. Instead, they remained as separate, springy grains like tiny pieces of soft, cooked pasta. All the while more whey was being forced out. You could see it happening, the liquid in the pot becoming cloudier and more abundant as the curds shrank and firmed up. This step was the cheesemaker's ultimate tool for controlling the future. A little more heat and a longer stir meant a drier, firmer cheese, one that could be salted and stored away for a soldier's long campaign. A shorter, gentler warming preserved more internal moisture, destined for a softer, fresher cheese that would be eaten within days. It was here, over that warm fire, that the destiny of the cheese was truly sealed. The patient, rhythmic stirring was not just a chore, it was the act of shaping time itself, transforming a fragile food into a lasting provision. With the curds firm and the whey fully separated, the moment arrived to part the solid from the liquid for good. The cheesemaker would carefully ladle the mixture, scooping up the soft, granular curds along with some of the whey, and pour it all into waiting woven baskets or perforated ceramic molds. These were not mere containers, they were the final sculptors of the cheese's form. As the curds settled into their new home, gravity began its slow work. The watery whey, now an unwanted guest, seeped through the countless tiny gaps in the weave or the carefully drilled holes in the clay, dripping steadily into a collection pot below. This was often just the first layer of a meticulous draining process. For a finer, smoother textured cheese, the cheesemaker might first use a loosely woven basket that allowed the curds to drain quickly, but retain some of their delicate structure. Then once the initial rush of whey had passed, they might transfer the still moist curds into a second, tighter mold. This second vessel, with its finer perforations, would continue the work of drying, but at a slower, more controlled pace, pressing the curds into a denser, more unified mass. The choice of how many times to strain and which molds to use was another act of culinary artistry. A single, quick draining in a coarse basket produced a loose, crumbly cheese, almost like a fresh farmer's cheese we might eat today. But multiple drainings to progressively finer molds created a firmer, more compact wheel, one that could withstand the pressing and salting to come. Listen for a moment and you can almost hear it, the steady drip, drip, drip of whey falling into the pot, a slow percussion marking the birth of something solid and lasting from what was once just liquid. That steady dripping of whey was far from a waste product. In the Roman world, nothing of value was ever truly discarded, and this leftover liquid was considered far too useful to simply pour away. After the precious curds were lifted from the vat, the remaining whey was collected with purpose. For the vast population of slaves and laborers who built and maintained the empire, this thin, slightly tangy liquid was a vital source of quick nutrition. It was a common sight to see workers in the fields or on construction sites drinking whey to quench their thirst and replenish their energy. Imagine it as the ancient equivalent of a modern sports drink, a hydrating beverage that came as a direct byproduct of the cheese-making process, costing virtually nothing yet providing essential salts and proteins. But its uses extended far beyond the drinking cup. In the farm's kitchen, whey became a secret ingredient for the baker. It could be used in place of water or milk when making bread, lending a subtle richness and helping the dough to rise, resulting in a loftier, more flavorful loaf. This was frugality in its purest form, a cycle where the waste from one food process enhanced another, and the cycle continued right back to the beginning. The very same sheep and goats that provided the milk would often have their leftover whey poured over their feed or offered to them as a drink. This practice returned valuable nutrients to the animals, boosting their health and potentially even improving the quality of their future milk. From the soldiers' marching ration to the slaves' refreshment and back to the flock in the field, every last drop of the milk found a purpose, weaving a perfect circle of efficiency that sustained the entire Roman way of life. But that careful process of draining was only the beginning of preservation. The true guardian of the cheese's future was about to be introduced, a simple mineral that was worth its weight in gold to the Roman legions: salt. Once the curds were sufficiently drained, they were often transferred to a large, clean bowl. Here, the cheesemaker would take handfuls of coarse sea salt and begin to work it meticulously through the mass of curds. This was not a gentle sprinkling, it was a thorough physical mixing, ensuring every single grain of curd came into contact with the tiny, sharp crystals. For other types of cheese, especially the larger, harder wheels, a different method was used. After being pressed into their final shape in the molds, the solid, pale wheels were submerged in a concentrated brine bath, a potent solution of salt and water. The cheese would float in this salty sea for hours or even days, absorbing the mineral directly through its rind. So why was salt so utterly indispensable? Its first role was as a fierce defender. In a world without refrigeration, moisture was the enemy, the element that allowed mold and bacteria to flourish and spoil food. Salt is hygroscopic, meaning it actively pulls water out of its surroundings. By drawing the last vestiges of moisture from the curds, salt created an environment that was simply too dry and hostile for most spoilage organisms to survive. This single step could extend the cheese's lifespan from a matter of days to many months or even years. Yet salt was far more than just a chemical preservative, it was the sculptor of flavor. Think of the difference between a completely plain, unsalted cracker and one with just a sprinkle of salt. That tiny addition does not just make it salty, it unlocks and enhances every other flavor present. For the Romans, salting transformed the bland, milky curds into something complex and savory. The salt accentuated the natural sweetness of the sheep's or goat's milk, balanced its subtle tang, and brought a deeply satisfying richness to the forefront. A soldier on a long march, gnawing on a piece of his hard, salty ration, was not just consuming calories, he was tasting the very essence of preservation, a flavor that meant survival itself. With the curds salted and drained, they still held the shape of a loose, crumbly mass. To forge this fragile substance into a durable wheel, the cheesemaker turned to the final tool of transformation, the press. The simplest presses were exercises in elegant efficiency. A filled mold would be placed on a slanted stone table with a groove to channel the last escaping whey. A heavy flat board was then laid directly on top of the curds, and upon that board a large, smooth river stone was carefully positioned. The sheer, silent weight of that stone did the work, slowly and steadily compacting the curds, fusing them from a collection of individual grains into a single, solid block. For cheesemakers seeking more control, there was the lever press. This device used a long, sturdy wooden beam. One end was anchored, while the other could be pulled down, applying immense pressure to a piston that sat directly on the cheese mold. By adjusting the position of weights along the beam, the cheesemaker could fine-tune the force from a gentle firming to an intense, bone-dry compression. The most advanced designs even incorporated a simple screw mechanism, allowing for incredibly precise and powerful pressure with just a few turns of a handle. The amount of pressure and the length of time the cheese remained in the press were decisions that shaped its entire future. A light, brief pressing produced a soft, open-textured cheese, one that might be eaten within weeks. But for the legendary hard cheeses that could last for decades, the press became a prison of immense force, held for days on end. This prolonged pressure did more than just remove the last traces of moisture, it initiated the creation of the rind. As the wheel was compressed, the proteins and fats on its outer surface were forced so tightly together that they formed a natural protective seal. This nascent rind was the cheese's first line of defense against the world, a barrier that would only grow tougher with age. The press in all its forms was the ultimate arbiter of destiny. It was here that a food decided its fate, transforming from a perishable ingredient into a historical artifact, solid enough to outlast empires. The newly pressed wheels were not yet cheese, at least not in the way a Roman would truly cherish them. They were blank slates, their final character still locked away in a future of patient waiting. Their next home was the cellarium, a storage room that was the complete opposite of the warm, active dairy. This space was cool, dark, and humid, often built underground or against a north-facing wall to maintain a constant, cave-like temperature. Here in the near silence, the real magic of maturation began. The air itself was a carefully managed environment, heavy with moisture that prevented the young cheeses from drying out and cracking before their time. This was not a passive storage closet, it was an active nursery where flavor was cultivated week by week, month by month. A fresh cheese, soft and mild, might only rest here for a few days before being rushed to the table, a delicate treat to be enjoyed immediately. But for the cheeses destined for greatness, this was just the beginning of a long slumber. A soldier's ration cheese, hard and salty, will be left to mature for many months, its texture hardening and its flavor concentrating into a powerful, savory punch. Then there were the legendary grating cheeses, the ancient ancestors of our modern Parmesan or Pecorino Romano. These colossal wheels were the marathon runners of the Roman larder. They were aged for a year, 2 years, sometimes even longer. Over this immense span of time, almost all of the moisture slowly evaporated, leaving behind a crystalline, granular texture that could be grated over stews and porridges. The flavors in these ancient cheeses deepened into something incredibly complex, developing sharp, nutty, and almost spicy notes that could transform a simple dish into a feast. In the quiet darkness of the cellarium, time itself became the most precious ingredient, and the Romans understood its value perfectly. They knew that the difference between a simple food and a legendary provision was measured not in pounds, but in seasons. That quiet cellarium held not one cheese, but an entire library of flavors. Roman writings reveal a world of variety, from the simplest fresh cheese to complex, aged delicacies prized by emperors. The most basic form was Cassius Recens, the fresh cheese. This was the farmstead cheese, made and eaten within days, soft, moist, and mildly tangy. It was the ancient equivalent of a fresh ricotta or farmer's cheese. It could not travel far and had no rind to speak of, a fragile pleasure best enjoyed close to its source. Cooks would crumble it over warm bread with a drizzle of honey for a simple dessert, or mix it into fillings for savory pastries. Its life was brief but delicious, a direct taste of the milk from which it came. Then there was Cassius Fumasus, the smoked cheese. The Romans discovered that exposing a young cheese to the gentle, constant smoke from a wood fire did more than just preserve it. The smoke infused the rind with a golden brown hue and the paste beneath with a deep, woodsy flavor that penetrated every bite. This process also created a tougher, more protective rind, allowing the cheese to be transported to nearby towns and markets. Each region's wood imparted a different character, oak lending a robust intensity while fruitwoods like apple offered a sweeter, milder perfume. A slice of smoked cheese brought the essence of the farm's hearth to the table, a flavor of earth and fire. But the true workhorse of the empire, the cheese that fueled legions and seasoned 1,000 meals, was Cassius Duris. This was the hard, dry, intensely salty cheese, the direct ancestor of modern Pecorino Romano. Pressed for days and aged for months or years, it lost nearly all its moisture, becoming a rock-solid wheel that could outlast any campaign. For a soldier, it was a reliable slab of protein and fat, grated or shaved into his daily wheat porridge, the pulse that was the backbone of his diet. In the kitchens of the wealthy, it was a powerful seasoning agent. A small block of this hard cheese would be grated over vegetables, stirred into sauces, and used to enrich expensive dishes like stuffed dormice, its sharp, savory punch acting as the ancient precursor to our Parmesan. So the next time you sprinkle a hard, salty cheese over your pasta, Remember, you are tasting a flavor that once marched with Roman legions and graced the tables of senators, a culinary echo that has lasted for 2,000 years. This dense, salty cheese was more than just food for a soldier. It was a tool of conquest. A Roman legionary on the march carried a pack that weighed nearly 100 pounds, and every ounce had to count. Alongside his wheat rations, his cooking pot, and his tools, he carried a hard, dry wheel of Cassius Duris. This cheese was his personal energy reserve, a compact block of fat and protein that could withstand weeks of jostling in a leather satchel under the blazing sun or in pouring rain. While his daily grain ration required milling and cooking, the cheese was ready to eat at a moment's notice, a quick, sustaining meal during a short rest stop or on night watch. Its incredible longevity came from the very processes we have followed, the intense pressing and heavy salting that made it nearly impervious to spoilage. A single wheel could sustain a man for months, providing crucial calories when supply lines were stretched thin or foraging failed. Think of the sheer scale of this provisioning. A single legion of around 5,000 men required thousands of these cheese wheels every year, all produced on farms across Italy and the provinces, all pressed, salted, and aged to a uniform standard of durability. They were not packaged in plastic, but in their own rock-hard rinds, often further protected by a coating of olive oil or a wrapping of cloth or leather. These durable parcels were then stacked in wagons or carried by mule trains, following the legions along the vast network of Roman roads into the forests of Germania and the deserts of Syria. The empire was built on the backs of its soldiers, and those soldiers marched on bread and cheese. The stark contrast between a legionary's ration and an emperor's delicacy reveals a society built on layers of taste and status. For the vast majority of Romans, cheese was a practical sustenance. Slaves, laborers, and common soldiers consumed Cassius Duris, that rock-hard, salty cheese designed for survival. Its flavor was bold and straightforward, its texture demanding effort to gnaw or grate. This was a food of necessity, a dense calorie block that powered the physical work of empire, from quarrying stone to marching 20 miles a day. It was often eaten with the simplest of accompaniments, perhaps a piece of coarse bread or stirred into a pot of cheap, filling lentil stew. The experience was purely functional, a means to an end. Yet in the lavish triclinium of a wealthy patrician's home, cheese was an entirely different experience, an object of luxury and connoisseurship. Here, cheese was not about survival, but about sensation. Banquet hosts would boast of serving cheeses from specific, distant regions, much like a modern foodie might prize a certain French brie or Italian gorgonzola. The poet Virgil wrote of a prized cheese from the mountains of Liguria, celebrated for its rich, distinctive character. Another writer, Columella, described a delicate, spreadable cheese from Vestini, a delicacy that would never survive a military campaign. For the elite, the variety was astounding. They enjoyed soft, fresh cheeses drizzled with expensive thyme honey from Attica, a sweet and savory combination fit for a dessert course. They savored richly smoked cheeses, their rinds rubbed with olive oil and herbs. The most extravagant tables might even feature Cassius Helveticus, a pressed cheese imported all the way from the alpine regions of Helvetia, modern-day Switzerland. Its very presence on a Roman platter was a symbol of wealth and far-reaching trade connections. This divide was about more than just flavor. It was a direct reflection of the Roman social order. The cheese on your plate announced your place in the world. A soldier's hardtack cheese spoke of discipline, endurance, and service. A slave's portion of whey or simple curds signified their position at the bottom of the economic ladder. But the patricians' curated selection of regional specialties was a performance of power, education, and refined taste. It was a way to display knowledge of the empire's diverse provinces and the financial means to acquire their finest products. The very same culinary process that created a durable ration for the many could also be refined, aged, and sourced to create exquisite luxuries for the few. In this way, a simple block of curds and salt became a perfect mirror of Rome itself, a society where what you ate told everyone exactly who you were. So how do we know all this? The story of Roman cheese is not just a guess. It is pieced together from hard evidence left in the soil and written on ancient pages. Our most detailed guides are the agricultural manuals written by Romans themselves, Men like Cato the Elder and Columella were practical farmers who wrote down their knowledge for future generations. Columella's 12-volume work on agriculture gives us the recipe. He describes the entire process we have followed, from warming the milk and adding the rennet to cutting the curd with a reed and pressing the cheese in its mold. He even specifies the exact amount of salt to use, a heaping handful for a specific quantity of curds. These were not theoretical texts, they were working documents, the practical handbooks of their day. Reading them is like looking over the shoulder of a first-century cheesemaker as he works, but words on a scroll are only one part of the story. Archaeology brings those words to life. In the ruins of Roman farms and villas across the empire, from Britain to North Africa, excavators have unearthed the very tools described in the texts. We have found the ceramic cheese molds, often still stained and worn from constant use. We have recovered the perforated pottery strainers and the heavy stone weights that served as presses. Holding one of these objects is a direct connection to the past. You can see the thumbprint of the potter who shaped the clay mold, or feel the smooth groove worn into a stone weight from years of pressing curds. The evidence becomes even more intimate when we look at the smallest details. Residue analysis on ancient pottery shards can now detect the telltale chemical fingerprints of dairy fats. On the inside of a cooking pot found in the ashes of Pompeii, scientists can identify the residues left by simmering milk. On a storage jar, they might find the traces of a long-vanished cheese. These molecular ghosts confirm what the texts and tools suggest, that cheesemaking was a daily, ubiquitous part of Roman life. Each piece of evidence is a fragment of a larger picture. The words of Columella tell us the method, the excavated molds show us the form, and the chemical residues confirm the substance. Like detectives solving a 2,000-year-old case, we combine these clues to reconstruct a complete and vivid world, one where the simple, satisfying craft of turning milk into cheese was a cornerstone of an entire civilization. The silent, dust-shrouded ruins of Pompeii hold a secret, one that was perfectly preserved in a single devastating moment. When Mount Vesuvius erupted, it did not just bury a city, it sealed a moment of daily Roman life under a layer of volcanic rock and ash. Among the countless artifacts recovered, some of the most telling are the humble remains of the city's dairy culture. In a small shop near the town's amphitheater, archaeologists uncovered a carbonized, wheel-shaped object. Scientific analysis confirmed it was cheese, a solid wheel that had been sitting on a counter, waiting to be sold when the hot ash entombed it nearly 2,000 years ago. This is not just an artifact, it is a direct, tangible link to the Roman cheesemaker's craft, a physical sample of the very cassius duris we have been discussing. In other homes, we find the tools of the trade exactly where they were left. A ceramic cheese mold, its perforations clogged with ancient residue, rests beside a cooking pot. A stone press weight lies on a stone counter, as if the maker simply stepped away for a moment. The sheer normalcy of these scenes is what makes them so powerful. This was not a special ritual or a ceremonial practice. It was ordinary commerce and daily sustenance, frozen in a tragic instant. The cheese from that shop was not destined for an emperor's table. It was food for the common people of Pompeii, the bakers, the soldiers, and the shopkeepers. Its presence tells us that the hard, durable cheese we have followed from the farm was not just a military ration, but a staple in the urban diet, available for purchase on any street corner in the empire. To stand before that carbonized wheel in a museum today is to look across the centuries and see not a relic, but someone's lunch, a simple piece of food that connects us directly to the heartbeat of Roman daily life. Roman cheesemaking did not remain confined within Italy's borders for long. As the legions marched, they carried their culinary technology with them, planting the seeds of a dairy revolution across the continent. In newly conquered territories like Gaul, local tribes who had their own simple methods of fermenting milk encountered the Roman system of rennet coagulated, pressed and aged cheeses. The Roman approach was not just a recipe, it was an industrialized process designed for scale and longevity. Archaeological finds in France show the sudden appearance of those distinct, perforated ceramic molds in Gallic farmsteads, a clear sign of technological adoption. The local tribes did not simply copy the Romans, however. They adapted the methods to their own rich dairy traditions, using the milk of their native cattle instead of sheep or goats. This fusion of Roman technique with local ingredients likely gave rise to early ancestors of the pressed, cooked curd cheeses that would one day become famous throughout the region. Similarly, in the misty highlands of Britain, the Roman presence introduced more systematic pressing and aging. The native Britons were already skilled dairy farmers, but the Roman insistence on salting and long-term maturation for hard cheeses created a new category of durable, tradable food. A cheese could now be made in the summer and still be edible deep into the winter, a crucial advantage in a northern climate. In the sun-baked provinces of Hispania, the impact was equally profound. The Romans found a land perfect for raising sheep, and they applied their rigorous methods to create a cheese that would become legendary. The hard, salty sheep's milk cheese produced in the region around Rome itself eventually evolved into what we now call pecorino romano, while the Spanish traditions, influenced by these same techniques, laid the groundwork for their own famous aged cheeses from Manchego to Idiazabal. This was not a one-way street of imperial imposition. It was a slow cultural exchange where a superior method of preservation was eagerly adopted and then creatively transformed. The Roman template provided the foundation, a reliable blueprint for turning milk into a lasting commodity, but it was the local climates, the unique breeds of animals, and the centuries of tweaking by French, British, and Spanish cheesemakers that built the incredible diversity of European cheeses we know today. The ghost of a Roman legionary's ration lives on in the granular texture of a Parmesan, the firm bite of a Cantal, and the rich oiliness of a mature pecorino. That carbonized wheel from Pompeii offers a silent challenge across the centuries. What did it actually taste like? This question has driven a fascinating branch of science known as experimental archaeology, where historians partner with skilled artisans to recreate the past with their hands. In labs and farmsteads, they have attempted the ultimate culinary time travel, making Roman cheese exactly as Columella instructed. They start with the most authentic ingredients possible, using raw milk from heritage-breed sheep that closely resemble ancient stock. They prepare rennet in the traditional way, soaking a dried piece of a kid goat's stomach lining in warm water to activate its enzymes. Then they follow the ancient recipe step by step, warming the milk in a ceramic pot, adding the rennet and cutting the delicate curds with a notched red. They press the forming cheese in a replica perforated ceramic mold, weight it down with a smooth river stone, and finally, bury it in a bed of coarse sea salt. The process is slow and demanding, a world away from modern, temperature-controlled dairy science. One of the biggest challenges is the waiting. Without modern climate control, the cheesemakers must replicate the conditions of a Roman celarium, a cool, humid, and dark space where wild molds and bacteria in the air would naturally colonize the rind. This uncontrolled environment is a gamble, and many experimental wheels have been lost to unexpected molds or improper drying, a stark reminder of the high stakes of ancient food preservation. When the successful wheels finally mature, the moment of tasting arrives with a sense of profound anticipation. Historians and cheesemakers gather to sample a flavor no living person has experienced. The reports are surprising. The recreated Roman cheese is often described as intensely salty, far saltier than most modern palates prefer. Yet beyond the initial salt punch, complex flavors emerge. The sheep's milk provides a distinct, gamey richness, while the natural aging process introduces sharp, tangy, and slightly peppery notes. The texture is often dry and granular, perfect for grating. It is not a mild, creamy cheese, but a powerful, assertive flavor designed to preserve and to last. Tasting it is not just about enjoying a food, it is about understanding a worldview. You are tasting the practical necessity of survival, the relentless drive for efficiency, and the bold, unapologetic palate of an ancient civilization. This single flavor connects the modern taster directly to the legionary on the frontier and the farmer in his villa, a tangible, edible thread woven through 2,000 years of history. That single taste from an experimental batch gives us a powerful glimpse, but modern science offers something even more revealing, a silent chemical testimony left on ancient pottery. The story of Roman cheese is now being rewritten in laboratories, where archaeologists use a technique called lipid residue analysis. When a Roman farmer poured milk into a ceramic jar, or a cook melted cheese in a bronze pot, tiny, invisible traces of fat seeped into the porous clay walls. These lipids, the molecular building blocks of fats and oils, are incredibly durable. They can survive for millennia, locked safely within the fabric of the pottery, even after the pot itself has been broken into fragments. Scientists can now take a small sample of these ancient shards, carefully drilling out a tiny bit of powder. In the lab, they use solvents to extract the ancient fats that have been preserved for 2,000 years. Through a process called gas chromatography, they can separate the complex mixture of lipids and identify their unique chemical signatures. The specific pattern of fatty acids acts like a fingerprint, telling researchers exactly what kind of substance was once stored or cooked in that vessel. Was it olive oil, animal meat, or dairy? The lipid profile for each is distinct, but the science goes even further. By analyzing the precise ratios of different carbon isotopes within these dairy fats, researchers can sometimes distinguish between the milk of different animals. They can identify the richer, more complex fat profile of sheep's milk, the lighter signature of goat's milk, or even the distinct markers of cattle milk. This allows us to move beyond just knowing that the Romans made cheese. We can now start to map its production and consumption with stunning accuracy. A pottery shard from a farmstead in northern Britain might reveal residues of a hard, cooked cheese made from cow's milk, adapted to the local resources. A fragment from a fine serving dish in a wealthy Pompeian house might tell a story of a soft, spreadable sheep's milk cheese, a luxury import enjoyed far from its pastoral origin. Each chemical signature is a silent witness, confirming the written records and physical tools, and proving that the craft of Roman cheesemaking was not just a legend, but a daily chemical reality that fed an empire. A Roman kitchen without cheese was like a legion without its standard, unthinkable. This was not a food eaten in isolation, but a fundamental ingredient woven into the very fabric of their meals, from the first course to the last. One of our clearest windows into this world is the Cookbook of Apicius, a collection of recipes that reveals the astonishing versatility of Cassius in the hands of a Roman chef. For a savory start, imagine a savory pie, a placenta. This was not a dessert, but a rich, layered dish of fine pastry, cheese, and bay leaves, baked until golden and fragrant. Cheese was also the star of a simple yet beloved preparation known as mortem. A cook would pound garlic, fresh herbs like cilantro or rue, a splash of vinegar, and a drizzle of olive oil in a mortar. Into this pungent green paste, they would work a generous amount of soft, fresh cheese, grinding it all together until the flavors married into a vibrant, spreadable delight. A slave would then scoop it onto a plate, often shaped into a neat mound to be eaten with fresh, crusty bread. It was a burst of sharp, herbal, and creamy flavors in every single bite, the Roman equivalent of a sophisticated cheese ball. But the true surprise comes at the end of the meal. The Romans had a pronounced sweet tooth, and cheese was a key player in their desserts. Apicius gives a recipe for a sweet cheese patina, a kind of baked custard. Fresh cheese was mixed with honey, crushed nuts, and sometimes a single egg to bind it, then baked in a special dish until set. The result was a rich, sweet, and tangy confection, a direct ancestor to modern Italian desserts like ricotta cheesecake. This incredible range from the pungent garlic spread to the honey dessert proves that Roman cheese was a culinary chameleon. It could be the bold, salty backbone of a soldier's gruel or the delicate, sweet centerpiece of a patrician's banquet, all depending on the skill of the hands that prepared it. Some modern food lovers might assume Roman cheese was overwhelmingly strong or even rotten, a pungent relic from a less refined age. This is perhaps the most persistent myth, that the Romans lacked the control to create subtle, nuanced flavors. In reality, their agricultural manuals prove a deep understanding of the entire aging spectrum. Columella explicitly describes how to produce a soft, fresh cheese for immediate consumption, a delicacy that was mild, milky, and meant to be enjoyed within days, not years. They were not simply leaving wheels in a cave to see what happened. They were actively managing the environment. The solarium was not a dank pit. It was a controlled space where temperature and humidity were regulated through design, creating the perfect nursery for developing rinds and complex, desirable flavors, not just uncontrolled decay. Another common misconception is that all Roman cheese was hard, salty, and made only for soldiers. While Cassius Durus was a vital ration, the literary evidence paints a picture of stunning variety. The wealthy elite sought out specific regional cheeses, valuing them for their unique characteristics, not just their durability. A soft cheese from Vestini or a smoked variety from the Alps would have been prized for its distinctive taste and texture, much like a fine brie or artisanal Gouda is today. The carbonized cheese wheel from Pompeii itself stands as silent testimony against this myth. It was not in a military barracks but a public shop, a common food available to everyday city dwellers. The Romans did not invent a single type of cheese, they perfected a system. This system gave them the flexibility to create everything from a quick, fresh spread to a rock-hard provision that could last for decades. They understood that aging was not an accident, but a deliberate art, one that could produce a bold, grating cheese for the legionaries' pot or a delicate, creamy treasure for the senator's palate. Their world of cheese was as diverse and sophisticated as their empire itself. That legacy of Roman cheese did not vanish with the empire's fall. It survived in the quiet, cool cellars of medieval monasteries and on rural farms across Europe, a durable thread of culinary knowledge passed down through generations. The Roman template for hard, aged cheese became the foundation upon which countless regional specialties were built. Consider Pecorino Romano, a name that proudly bears its origin. This iconic sheep's milk cheese is a direct culinary descendant, made for over 2,000 years in the Italian region of Lazio, using methods that would feel deeply familiar to a Roman cheesemaker. Its sharp, salty, granular character is the living taste of the ancient soldier's ration. Then there is Parmesan or Parmigiano Reggiano, the king of Italian cheeses. While it originated later in the Middle Ages, its very existence relies on the Roman technological legacy. The process for making Parmigiano, with its immense, slowly matured wheels, is a direct evolution of the Roman principles of intense pressing, prolonged salting, and multi-year aging. These were not independent inventions, they were refinements of a proven system. The influence stretches far beyond Italy. In the mountains of Switzerland, the tradition of large, cooked curd cheeses like Gruyere echoes the Roman focus on durability and flavor concentration. The hard, tangy cheddars of England and the nutty manchego of Spain all share a common debt to the Roman model of using salt, pressure, and time to create something extraordinary from simple milk. When you grate a hard cheese over your pasta today, you are using a seasoning that a Roman cook would instantly recognize. You are participating in a tradition that fueled legions, delighted emperors, and quietly shaped the very flavor of Europe itself. This is the unbroken chain of taste, a 2,000-year-old recipe that continues to thrive on our own tables. From the herdsman's careful milking at dawn to the final wheel aging in a quiet cellarium, this was a journey of pure ingenuity. The Romans transformed a fragile liquid into a food of conquest, using nothing more than reeds, salt, and stone. They mastered the invisible power of rennet, harnessed the simple force of a weighted press, and understood that time itself was a vital ingredient. Their cheese fed armies, defined social status, and seasoned an entire cuisine, leaving a flavor legacy that still graces our tables today. So we have to ask, armed with the knowledge of every step, from the woven strainer to the ceramic mold, would you dare to taste a cheese made by ancient Roman methods? Let us know your thoughts below and subscribe to join us as we continue uncovering the delicious mysteries of the past.